which really connects, of course, to this conversation that we are having. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo has lamented the lack of action by Parliament to prevent a repeat of state capture. His comments come exactly a year after he submitted his final report into the alleged looting of the state by politically connected individuals. Legal analyst Nthabiseng Dubazana and political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng joins us now for more on this. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight. Quite ironic, isn't it, if we were, Asanda, to look at the situation where the findings of the Zondo Commission is that there is manipulation of rules and procedures of decision-making in government in order to facilitate what he calls corrupt advantage. Now we are looking at a case right now where rules were changed. I mean, they tell you straight up that this was not even a tender. It was actually just a purchase order because there was no competitive bidding. And 500 million or 250 million, whatever it is, just like that, was given. Is this an indication of, again, this lack of political will to adhere to those recommendations that the Commission actually put forward? Good evening.
Good evening. I think it's very difficult to prosecute people when half of the people mentioned in the Zondo Commission report and half of the people recommended to be investigated are the ones who are sitting in our leadership and in the highest leadership structures. And so if you look at that fact, then it becomes clear that while some parts of the state, the State Capture Commission will certainly and have certainly been investigated, there are a lot of parts that are going to remain uninvestigated and, simply left to be, because the kind of people that need to be investigated are the ones who would have to kind of provide some of their signatures, or it's going to be their colleagues who are going to have to provide signatures for their prosecution. And this is just yet another reminder that for as long as we have, unfortunately, the corrupt ANC in power, we are not going to see an end to state capture, because corruption has become the culture of the ANC, and it has become the culture of business in the ANC and in government. And for as long as we have this current government and it isn't doing enough to remove everybody from those who are at the very top to those who are their henchmen like Edwin Zondi, we are going to continue to see lots and lots of corruption going on, and many people getting away with it. And unfortunately, what's been happening is that we are seeing, yes, some cases making it to court, but more often than not, it is the small fry who is being put on blast. It is also people who are not necessarily as politically powerful as the incumbent leaders. So people like Brian Molefe have been paraded in front of us in order to show us that there's some action, but the ministers behind him and the ministers behind the state enterprises that he was running have not answered any real questions or any real case as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Nthabiseng, was the recommendations a little bit ambitious? I mean, one of the things was to come up with a charter, a national charter against corruption in procurement with a binding code of conduct, right? The creation of an independent agency against corruption in procurement, which includes a council and an inspectorate, a litigation unit, a tribunal, and a court. The creation of what is called a procurement officer professional body. I mean, all these things, one would think they would have been easily put together like you put together a task team. I mean, we've got 101 task teams that are just like that. Tomorrow, it will be instituted and it will be in place. Yet it is so difficult to put together such a body to look at procurement corruption.
I think the main issue is the way our constitution is phrased due to the separation of power that it has been instituted in the constitution. So to try and formulate such a body would include all the arms of government having to work together to do that. So based on the way in which the many recommendations of the different volumes of the commission that came with it, it's going to be a little bit of a difficult feat. Remember, the commission in itself in the beginning, the normal form of a commission was that anything that was found out within that commission could not be used in order to institute criminal proceedings against the people who testified there. So as time went on, there was a change in that government gazette, even though it was not saying that any evidence that you give at the commission, you will be criminally prosecuted for, but it opened the window rather for NPA to be able to investigate and thereby proceed to institute criminal proceedings against the people that gave evidence then, once they've accumulated their own evidence apart from what is laid out in the commission. Now, looking at all of that, you have to now find judges who will be able to sit and oversee on this panel. Judges are appointed by the president. The president right now, in part of the commission, he had to go and testify. So would it not be seen as a conflict for him to appoint somebody who's going to investigate him? That would be something we look at. And then we need to look at the NPA people, the NDPP, the head of the NPA, who's appointed by who gets appointed by the president himself. So all of these things, it's going to be a little bit of a difficult situation when we deal with the separation of powers, because the people that are implicated in this outcome, the report of the commission, all of them in one manner or form have some kind of stance or some kind of holding within each arm of government, and then trying to put in a committee that's going to be really impartial and really objective in order to investigate, prosecute, and hopefully find people guilty as a result of things that were found out here. Was going to be a difficult feat. As it is difficult for the NPA to be alleviated from the burden of the number of cases they have on the roll on a daily basis. It is so difficult. So how then are we going to now open another court wherein we can't even put our own courts currently with normal cases, to flow properly so things are not backlogged or backdated?
Yeah, and has there been, as somebody who watches these things in law, has there been an ounce of change in legislation and regulation towards enhancing transparency and strengthening, I suppose, the parameters when it comes to procurement?
It is supposed to be, I suppose, as open and as out there as humanly possible. But if you are not making it so, in other words, when you're not putting it in platforms where the public are able to see this easily, it seems as if you're doing things behind doors. So yes, the judiciary has its own channel wherein there's interviews, for example, the JSC interviews for judges and all of that, wherein the public can interact with them. But not everybody has access to the internet. Not everybody has access to YouTube, whatever the case may be, in order to participate in such things. When we go further into government gazettes, which are rather free and easily accessible to the public, which is not the case. Government gazettes are supposed to be where us as the public are requested to comment on any bill that's being put forth and see that we can have our voice put in the legislation that's going to be ruling and governing us. But how many of the public actually know that this is done and this can be done? Very few. And as a result, the laws that are currently in action right now are not laws wherein the people have spoken on. Very few people have commented on various legislation that has come out, and when it comes out, it hits the public as a shockwave. That how could this happen and why were we not consulted? And yet it was out there, but not in platforms that are readily available to the people. That is the downfall, I believe, of not, making the law as easily accessible to the public.
Yeah, well, one of those, of course, is the bill on the amendment of the electoral system. And when we come back, Asanda, I want you to just comment on that and how that was approached. Certainly one of the recommendations by the Commission that that electoral system be changed so that it goes to a constituency-based kind of approach and people can vote directly for the president. All right, we'll continue on that conversation when we come back from the break. Your thoughts on 072-110-5584. Why it seems, it's difficult to implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. What are your thoughts? a year on, we're looking at the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture and what has been put in place and what the implications are of those things that have not been implemented. And by the looks of things, a large part of it has actually not been implemented. Legal analyst Nthabiseng Dubazana, political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng are with us, and you're part of it as well, 072-110-5584. So, Asanda, the country currently uses a closed party list proportional representation system in which parties are represented in proportion to their electoral support. The Chief Justice in the Commission suggesting that we need to reform this in order to have a constituency-based kind of representation so that voters have a little bit more influence over who gets to be president. Okay, political parties don't seem to like this. I mean, they're putting all sorts of things as conditions that you must get 20,000 or 25,000 signatures, and if you can't, you lose all those votes. They won't count for you. But political parties can consolidate all those votes, and that counts as a seat. It's a whole complicated situation. Is that a deliberate thing to frustrate, I suppose, this particular recommendation?
Yes, of course. You know, we've seen that there's inequality in terms of the expectations of independent candidates compared to those expectations of the political party, who, by the way, will automatically also have more people interested because they represent the potential of more people to be in power versus an independent candidate who's pushing for an individual, particularly, to be in leadership. And I think it's important that, you know, these changes have been made. And while it's not the perfect law and hasn't, you know, completely restructured in the ways that people wanted it, I think it's important that the change has happened and that there's still a need to push for more changes so that there is more equity between the way independent candidates and political party members are treated. The reason for this is because we have seen with the political party system that political parties are in the business of protecting corrupt members rather than upholding the interests of the very people who voted for them. We've seen this particularly in the ANC in 2021 elections, with many people across many provinces alleging that, you know, they put forward a specific candidate, but the party list ended up with a different person. And we saw that there was a Kgalema Motlanthe commission which sought to look into this, and there are particular provinces that have been hit more than others, but it is a widespread, it has been a widespread issue across South Africa. And so this is an indication that the democracy that political parties have been running has been failing us, and this is why people have been calling for and demanding for constituency-based politics, because they allow you to say, we voted this person in and they are not performing, therefore we want them to be removed, in a way that isn't as easy in political parties, because political parties tend to get entrenched and specific people tend to kind of cling to power and use their power within the political party to continue to be in power long after the people who initially voted for them are in support of them and their actions. This is why we have state capture and why we have so many people sitting at the highest decision-making body of the ANC while they are, their names are littered all over the Zondo Commission report.
Yeah. Now, in the political realm, Asanda, one of the things that is striking to me is that I don't think, for example, even in the ANC itself, they are taking these recommendations seriously, right? One of the things that the Commission found was that Cadre Deployment Committee played a critical role, particularly in appointing the wrong people at SOEs, using that political power, and those people ended up certainly messing things up and resulting into state capture. And immediately, Paul Mashatile, I think, is one. He's now deputy president. He wasn't at the time, and he said, "No, I don't think as the ANC we agree with the Chief Justice on this thing of cadre deployment, and certainly doesn't mean we will implement it." I mean, in the political sense, that particular recommendation is going to be quite difficult to implement, is it not?
Yes, because I think, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with cadre deployment in and of itself, because this is how political parties across the world ensure that people who are aligned with their policies and who will implement the policies that the voters have voted them into are there to kind of implement. So cadre deployment on its own, not a problem. What is the problem? The problem is when, unqualified people who do not have the qualifications, who do not have the experience, and who are specifically put there knowing they don't have the capacity in order for them to be used as tools by the political party to ensure that certain decisions are taken that are going to be in the interest of the party but not in the interest of the country. That is when there's a problem with cadre deployment. So it's more the implementation rather than the kind of system of cadre deployment itself. The DA uses cadre deployment. All these other political parties do the same thing. They take people who are political party members and they put them in state agencies, and they've been doing this for a long time. And so it surprises me that, organizations like the DA are now pretending like they don't do this when they do it themselves. And so what we should be attacking is not necessarily cadre deployment in its essence, but the ways in which it's implemented and the implication it has for corruption. But I think that, what's also important to understand is that it doesn't matter how many laws, how many bills, how much legislation you put in place. If the people who are meant to uphold those laws, who are meant to uphold that legislation, are the ones who are at the helm, are the ones who are, corrupt. So you had a president in President Jacob Zuma who was found to be, according to the Zondo Commission, at the center of ensuring that the Guptas had an open gate when it came to any SOE. You have various ministers who were found to also be very much involved in Busasa corruption and in every other state capture, state entity corruption, meaning that the very people who have been entrusted by South Africa through their positions, through their vote, were the ones who were facilitating corruption. And so, yes, laws are good after the fact when we need to hold people to account and we need to be able to point at the actual thing that they broke. But ultimately what you need is to rethink the kind of leadership that we allow to lead us in this country. We need ethical leaders. We need leaders who are morally upstanding and who actually have the interests of the people at heart and are not just interested in amassing more power and wealth for themselves and for their political party. And until we get that right, we are going to continue to do a round robin of laws and bills and legislative interventions that are going to go nowhere, because the very people who are supposed to uphold them are the ones who are going to be, decimating them. As we're seeing now with Eskom, the head of security is the one who's alleged to have ensured that there was insecurity. How do you legislate against that?
Most definitely. Nthabiseng, what are the legal limitations, in your view, that would hamper this proposed consideration of giving change to the South African electoral system?
It would basically be on the Constitution and the way that it was drafted. So the way in which the separation of powers has been established in our Constitution is that the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature should be basically the three different arms of government. So now if we're going to say that there's going to be an electoral dimension wherein the vote indirectly, it's all well and good. So when it comes to a situation wherein we are faced with a president who is not abiding by the instructions that are given to him or her, but by the people that have voted them in, how then do we dismantle or remove this person from the seat that they are currently holding? So the National Assembly has a manner in which it has been formed, and it constitutes a number of political persons or political parties therein. Then how then do we then formulate a situation that is not hostile to the president? Did you understand what I'm saying? So because where it is right now is a situation whereby there is lack of confidence in the president, then they have that what is the term? I forget the term, what it is called. And then they vote for impeachment. They try and impeach the president, wherein they say they lack confidence in how this president is running the country and whatever the case may be. And by virtue of the political power political parties that are within the National Assembly, when they vote their opinions on whether or not they want the president impeached or not, they are protected by the political party in which they fall in. Most of the time, that is how the president ends up continuing to be the president. So when it comes to a situation where the president is not upholding the laws, is breaking the laws, is leading corruption, etc., and then such an impeachment happens, then would it not be a situation where the president can take that impeachment on review, rightfully so, and say that it was a hostile environment as there was nobody who was there on his side to protect him based on the rules that are put in place for the National Assembly to deal with such situations? That is the first thing that I am looking at that could be a problem at the end of everything once we've appointed said president. Now, when we look at in the history of how the Electoral Commission has been dealing with the elections, we find a situation that's going to put us, in a dire situation. How then are you going to monitor the way in which the votings are going to be placed for this particular individual? As it is, we find situations whereby political parties are saying that there's been rigged voting and then there's to be a recounting, there has to be all of these other things that are affected by virtue of the voting system. And with the new rules that you were mentioning earlier, that as an individual who wants to run to be president, you need to have 25,000 signatures, and how do you authenticate those signatures? How do you ensure that it's not a Nthabiseng that is busy changing their handwriting, for example, and giving herself those 25,000 signatures? How do you monitor and authenticate and make sure that the people that are running for these for the seat of the president are indeed ethical, they have integrity, and they can abide by what the Constitution puts on the head of the first person or the first leader of our country?
Right, we're back live with you tonight here on In Focus. Legal analyst Nthabiseng Dubazana and political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng still with us, and we're talking, of course, the implications of the Zondo Commission state capture report so far and what has been put in place and what has not been put in place. Nthabiseng, regarding the oversight, right, you mentioned there's a little bit what Parliament needs to do. The Commission proposed various reforms to be considered by Parliament, including the establishment of an oversight committee on the presidency. We still don't particularly have that, but what tools of oversight need to be brought into the toolbox of the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the legislatures, including councils at local municipalities, to ensure that we strengthen that function?
Sure, those are very many tools that you have to look at. One, you need to ensure that the people that you're going to appoint to oversee all these various commissions have to be extremely impartial, have to be objective, have to be independent, and be able to stand against all the currents that's going to come against them, because guaranteed they're going to be dealing with a lot that's going to be coming their way. I would think that we would need a committee that is evenly spread out between the various arms of government. So in terms of the National Assembly, we would need a representation at least from all the various political parties that are there. We definitely need people who are in the law, be it attorneys, be it advocates who are able to understand and apply the applicable knowledge of the Constitution. One, two, whatever the rules or laws that are going to be implemented for those particular commissions, they need to abide by the Constitution. I think it may lead to the Constitution being amended in these circumstances. If there's something the judiciary will have to have a say on, is something where the National Council of Provinces is going to have a say on, and to determine how best to ensure that the integrity of the Constitution doesn't get affected, and ensuring as well that the statute of limitations does not get abused, in the sense that it is within the interest of justice for us to continue in this trajectory because we think that this is how it should be done. We have to find people that are going to be able to balance the rights of the public and the interest of the public in all of these situations, but also balancing the rights of the people who are going to be accused and have to answer to these various committees. I'm saying this looking at the Section 194 inquiry that is currently going on. We are looking at a situation where it's never happened before, it's unprecedented, and when we look at how it was established and how the first day of that inquiry being held, I always refer back to one of the committee members that were sitting there and saying that if we're going to judge this individual, we should judge this individual based on her entire body of work and not just the few cases that made it to the media. And that was a bone of contention because it seemed as if the committee was only made to deal with only these certain cases and not her entire body of work to see that if she is capable or not. So we need people who are able to be impartial and be objective and look at the situation without having to immerse themselves. Now, even if we do get a situation where we represent the different political parties that are involved in this matter, it may be a situation where they are influenced in one manner or another to try and protect people that are represented by them who are possibly being accused in all of these various committees. As a result, it will probably be more recommendable, if that's the word I'm looking for, to not even involve the politics actually, and just look for people who are going to be in the legal space, people who are supposed to be consultants and who are independent, to look at these various things that were dealt with in the report and ensure that the investigations are done correctly and ensure that whatever comes of these investigations end up being prosecuted correctly without there being any flaws. But unfortunately, when it comes to our criminal justice system, we are still lagging way behind when it comes to how our investigation needs to go. It is very sad, and unfortunately because of that, a number of our criminal matters, people go free. This is what we use as criminal defense attorneys. If chain evidence is missing and it wasn't done properly, then the person is going to walk. So we need people who are going to be hired to give the prosecution the kind of training that they need, to give the SAPS the kind of training that they need to do forensic investigation, because this is going to need a lot of knowledge in how to dig in and not just rely on Section 205 of the Criminal Procedure Act. This is just, what I think we should be looking at if we're going to compile such a committee to look into these recommendations.
Asanda, around oversight and accountability, I mean, a lot there being mentioned by Nthabiseng, for example, the Section 194 committee, if we look at that, it's currently embroiled in controversy around possible bribery. It's not a word that is used apparently anymore, but it's corruption of some money being extorted from somewhere. But we've also got the 3-member panel, for example, that was looking into the Pala report and how that was just kind of voted out and nothing was done about that. Is there ultimately a political will to use these tools of oversight?
I think that, we have a problem of political will, first of all, which we spent some time talking about, but we also have a problem of capacity. If you look at the NPA, if you look at the Hawks and the kind of capacity that they have versus the kind of capacity that they need, you'll see that it is missing. And this goes directly back to political will, because it is political will that ensures that the president and the finance minister assigns these very important units the kind of budgets that they need, and also ensures that South Africa has the forensic science capacity that it needs, because we have people who have studied and are studying forensic science, but we don't have enough of those people hired in the places that they need to be so that they can do the investigations in the way like, Nthabiseng previously spoke about. And I think that, we have, as I said, a problem of political will. And for as long as political will is not there, the steps that follow are going to be missing. And what is going to be required is for every South African to continue to call for the current government and all future governments to be accountable for the wrongdoings of their political party members and be accountable for the kind of person that lands up in leadership in the first place. And we're going to need to go further to say that as communities and as families, we cannot and should not sit by and do nothing and sit by and not call out our own relatives who are involved in corruption or have any question marks around their actions, because it starts in our homes, in the ways in which we kind of take corruption for granted, or we don't challenge the people around us, because these people who have been corrupt live in our communities. They are related to us, and they do show this wealth that we don't know where it comes from, in front of people. And so we shouldn't allow people to get away with becoming wealthy in ways that we don't understand, and to continue and pretend as if we can't see that something is amiss. Because at the end of the day, the people who suffer are South Africans who are now, for instance, bearing the brunt of load shedding and having to pay, double the money that we have already paid to try and get Eskom back on its track, to try and get PRASA back on track, to try and figure out what to do with Denel. And now we're sitting, with SAA barely there, but not really being functional in the ways that it has. And this has had an impact on the entire aviation industry, for instance. All things that have happened because there was corruption and it was running rampant, and there was no one who was there to stop it and say enough is enough. And so every single South African has that responsibility. And of course, the most important responsibility is for South Africans in 2024 to vote with their feet and go and vote for a government that they think can deliver a corruption-free government. And they need to step out and go and vote, because part of the reason why we're here is because a very small percentage of South Africans actually get out and vote on the day that voting happens. And so we end up with the same leadership and we end up with the same problems and nothing changes. And the biggest loser in all of this is always the average South African, who has to be beholden to the results of what happens when money goes missing and what happens when money is misappropriated and misspent.
Let's leave it there for tonight. I appreciate you both. Thanks so much for coming on. That is Asanda Ngoasheng and Nthabiseng Dubazana there.